Is that when you went out drinking in South Carolina? Was that the trip that you and he went out drinking?
Went out drinking.
Did you go to do you remember the Pulse restaurant?
Say again?
The Pulse restaurant?
It is a dance club, not a restaurant.
Okay. Do you remember going there?
We went to dinner at a restaurant, an actual restaurant, and then, yeah, afterwards, we were walking along, and he said, let's check out this place. I found this place online. It was a place just to have drinks. That was my impression at the time.
Okay. Did you go there?
Yep.
And what did you do there?
We had some drinks at the bar, maybe 1, 2.
Did you dance?
I got onto the dance floor myself, as I explained. I've been a trained dancer for some time. Going to be able to dance freely is like a release. I'm very much in my own space when I do that, and so I got up and I was dancing alone on the dance floor.
Did you dance with the defendant?
He came to join the dance floor, did not join me necessarily on the dance floor initially, and he was also dancing, and then there was a time where he reached out his hand and, as the defense has said, twirled me around, and that's it.
Was there other contact?
There was not.
None?
Besides dancing, like partner dancing?
Yeah.
No.
Did you kiss him or did he kiss you?
No. Nope. But I guess you have people that have said that that did occur.
Do you have any idea why someone would believe you were kissing?
No, I don't.
Okay.
In this case, when you're talking about alleged affairs and someone else's husband being murdered, I think people tend to think they saw a lot of things.
Well, and let me ask you that. This is a gentleman who, up to this point in time, has asked you to marry him at least twice that we're aware of, right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Correct.
And has expressed his love for you in just emails numerous times, correct?
Correct.
And you're going to a dance club drinking with him, correct?
I didn't go to the dance club as a drinking activity, and nor did I know at the time it was a dance club until we got in there. But yes, I was there.
And you stayed?
Yep, I stayed.
Did you have adjoining rooms at that trip in Greenville?
Yeah, yes, yes.
Did you and he spend time in each other's room or in one of the rooms together?
When we got to the hotel, I remember sitting briefly on the balcony of my room, but then that was that. There was no other additional time, if that's what you're asking.
So he never spent time in your room?
Besides what I just explained, no.
Did the defendant ever tell you he was going to a gun show in Dalton?
No.
On October 31st of 2010, did the defendant text you while he was at the gun show at Dalton and tell you he was there?
No. Tell me that he was at a gun show?
Yes, ma'am.
I do not remember him texting me that.
Now, is this like the other emails that it could happen, you just don't remember?
No, I'm pretty sure I'd know gun show, but...
You didn't remember I love you. Would you remember a gun show?
I didn't say that I didn't remember. I didn't remember all these emails from 2 years ago. Similarly, okay. I don't think I could remember the content of texts from 2 years ago either.
Yes, ma'am. The evening of the morning, let me go back to the morning of November 10th. Do you remember that morning?
I do.
So what happened? What do you remember that morning?
I was in the office, and I got a call maybe close to 9 o'clock. I don't remember, somewhere between 8 and 9 from Rusty.
What did Rusty say?
He said someone was just on the side of the house, and he was sort of not completely coherent, but said someone was like sleeping on the side of the house, and he called the police, and then he had to go really quickly to talk to the police, and then he ended up calling me back and told me the whole story of what had happened, which was that He had put Ian in the car, as he does every day around that time, and Ian's car seat is on the right passenger side in the back, and as he walked around, he smelled gas. As he walked, because he sort of exits the garage a little bit to get to his side of the car, he smelled gas. And our gas meter and pipe is on the left side of the house if you're looking at the front. So he walked over to that spot that's near our air conditioners, and he said that there was a man lying face down on the ground.
You said that Rusty called you.
Yep.
And as soon as Rusty ended that call, or you ended the call, who did you call?
I have no idea. I was at work, so I was presumably doing work things.
Any idea why you would immediately call the defendant after talking to Rusty?
I'm sure it was, no. I'm sure it was work-related. It does seem coincidental, but I'm sure that there was something else going on that I had to call him about. I talk to him frequently about work matters. And I had a meeting with Hemy that day. And I told Hemy exactly what happened on the side of my house. And I told the person that worked for me, I told Hemy, I told like 6 other people also what happened on the side of my house, because it was bizarre and scary. And he stared at me and looked at me, and it was him the whole time.
Did you know that then?
No. How could I know that? He was sitting there like an absolute normal individual. He came to work. He was at work. For all I know, he was at work that entire time. I don't care. We don't work in the same building. I don't know where he was at that time.
Okay.
Rusty didn't recognize him. Well, how would Rusty recognize him? He was wearing a disguise. He described him as a Mexican worker.
Did Rusty describe him as running when Rusty came around the corner?
No, when Rusty backed up out of the garage. So Rusty had a communication with him, but now I know why, but Hemy never responded, because if he had spoken, I'm sure Rusty would have recognized who he was. So he stayed silent the entire time, and Rusty panicked. He got in the car, backed out of the driveway, and once he was at the end of the driveway picking up the phone to call 911, Hemy ran across the lawn over to a place that only someone who had been stalking my house for months would have known existed. There is a pathway in the woods in my neighborhood that runs between one neighborhood and another.
So somebody that ran there would have had to have had that information?
Absolutely no. There's no way to know about that sidewalk. It's not even really a sidewalk. It's like a path that neighbors have made between one... I live in a cul-de-sac neighborhood. I lived in a cul-de-sac neighborhood.
Somebody would have to tell him about that.
Someone would tell him?
How else would he find out?
He had been stalking my house for months.
How did you find that out?
I think we all know that by now.
So that's a guess on your part?
It is a speculation on my part,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. On the evening of November 16th, did the defendant come over to your house?
Yes. I had just been on a cruise with my husband. We hadn't been on a vacation for years, alone, without the children. I had a project I needed to complete, and Hemy insisted it had to be completed that day. And so the only way in which to, and it required his input, and the only way in which to finish it was to work on it that night.
So he came to your house?
Yeah.
How long was he at your house?
Because I had to pick up my children from school. I went and left work, picked up my children, put them to bed. Rusty had a business meeting, wasn't coming home that night until about 8, which I knew. And I was responsible for the children. So he came around 7:30, 7:45.
Okay. Did the defendant meet your children?
Nope.
Were they already in bed?
Yes.
Okay. And did Rusty return home before the defendant left?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Did Rusty and the defendant talk?
Yes.
What time do your children normally go to bed now?
7:30.
And I keep going back to this, but I just want to clarify. You had a man over to your house with your children.
I had no choice
With your
but to
husband.
continue my career and my job. And he made...
Ms. Sneiderman, the lawyer has a right to ask a question. You can give a response, but let him finish the question. He's going to allow you to finish your answer. You may ask your question.
Thank you, Judge. This is the same man who repeatedly said he loved you, who repeatedly asked you to marry him, that came to your house with your children in their beds to work on a project.
Yep.
At your house.
Yep.
And at this time, did Rusty still know about the advances, or did Rusty know about the advances of the
No.
defendant? Did GE know?
No.
Okay. About what time did the defendant leave that evening, ma'am?
I don't know, maybe 9:30, 10, something along those lines. Might even have been slightly later.
Okay, I'm moving forward to November 18th. Rusty is at the Dunwoody Prep School. Maybe be the obvious, but please tell me why Rusty was at the Dunwoody Prep School.
He took Ian to school
Did he do that every morning, or most mornings?
most mornings.
And did he do that about that same time?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any idea how the defendant would know that?
No. Only if he was watching my house for weeks in advance.
That morning, did you get a phone call from the daycare?
Yep.
What did they tell you?
Really didn't tell me anything. They said there has been an accident.
I'm sorry, just speak up a little, please.
They said there had been an accident, that Ian was fine, but there had been an accident.
And the accident specifically was directed to Rusty? Or did they tell you?
They didn't really tell me.
Okay.
And then I screamed into the phone asking what was going on. They just said, you need to come here. So I dropped the phone and ran out of my office.
Did you, prior to dropping the phone, did they clarify it was Rusty, or they didn't tell you?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I presumed it was Rusty. I don't know whether they actually said. Maybe they said it has something to do with Rusty. I don't
Okay.
remember.
Did they at any time tell you what had happened to Rusty?
Nope.
Okay. And I think you just told me, were you at work when you got that call?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember who it was that called you?
Yes.
Who was it, ma'am?
Donna. She's the one. I don't remember her last name, but she's the one that's sort of the manager of the daycare.
So she's someone that you were familiar with?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you just said you ran out a moment ago, but when they called you, you ran out. What did you do? Where did you go?
Ran to the parking lot, to my car. I ran down the stairs. And I ran to the parking lot. I got in my car and I drove. I made several phone calls.
Do you remember who you called?
Oh. My parents. My brother, Rusty's parents.
Okay, Rusty's parents. Do you remember who you talked to?
Yep, I talked to Rusty's dad.
Okay, Don Sneiderman?
Yep.
Okay.
And I said, I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead. You said what to Don Sneiderman?
I said, something's happened to Rusty. I have no idea what, and that's all I said. And I was belligerent on the phone.
Okay, at the time you called Don Sneiderman, at that time, did you know what had happened to Rusty?
No.
Okay.
I didn't know what happened to Rusty until I got to the emergency room.
Okay.
No one told me what happened to Rusty.
Who else did you call when you were on the way to the daycare?
I don't remember, but evidently I tried to call Hemy, probably to tell him I had left the office and that something had happened, which was a very normal thing for me to have done, was to tell my boss that I had left the office and something had happened to my husband.
Do you remember what his cell number was at the time?
No, I don't.
Okay. If I read it, would you remember it?
No, because I'm sure I had it on speed dial on my phone, so
Okay.
there's no chance I could have remembered his phone number.
Okay.
Okay?
Do you remember your cell number at the time? Let me ask you, was it 404-371-1931?
I don't remember. That sounds right. I had it for a very short period of time,
Okay.
but that sounds right.
Do you remember how many times you called Rusty within that first 10 minutes? I mean, not Rusty, I'm sorry. How many times you called the defendant during that first 10 minutes?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I'm sure I tried to reach him to tell him that I was on my way and that something had happened.
Did you leave him a message?
Don't know.
Okay.
I barely could have my foot on the gas pedal and go fast enough.
Did you ever attempt to call the defendant's office phone to see if he was there?
I don't know. I don't know what number I pressed on the phone. I rarely used his office phone. I don't think very many people do. I mean, that's just not how you get a hold of him. He's never in his office.
And I think you've just stated this, but did you know prior to arriving to the daycare what had happened to Rusty?
No.
Okay. From leaving work to arriving at the daycare, I think you said you presumed or they indicated that something had happened to Rusty.
Right.
How many times did you call Rusty?
Call Rusty?
Rusty.
0 times.
Why didn't you call Rusty?
Because they just told me something had happened to Rusty. What are the chances that he's going to be answering his cell phone?
They didn't tell you what happened to Rusty.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just curious, why did you call Rusty?
Is that the question?
No, ma'am.
Let's ask questions. What's
Yes,
the next
sir.
question?
When you left the daycare, where did you go? Let me back up. You arrived at the daycare, correct? How long did you stay there?
I don't remember.
Okay. Do you remember if you went inside?
Yep. I was
Okay.
taken inside. I pulled up in my vehicle to caution tape and police cars and Rusty's car, but no Rusty.
Okay.
I fell out of the vehicle. I was picked up by I don't know who and taken inside.
Was it a police officer, do you remember?
No idea.
Okay. And when you were taken inside, did you talk to anybody, or did someone talk to you, or do you remember?
I remember one of Sophia's, they sat me down in this office that they have, this little office room. I remember one of Sophia's teachers, Katrina is her name, and she came in, she was hugging me, couldn't let me go. No one was talking. No one was saying a word. No one would tell me what happened. And then eventually, Gary Cordolino from the Dunwoody Police Department sat down in front of me and started asking me questions. Asked,
Do you remember how long that lasted, ma'am?
felt like 3 seconds, but I
Okay.
have no idea.
And at that time, did you leave the daycare?
Eventually, my parents came from Roswell, so I was on the phone with them almost the entire way to the daycare. I was on the phone with them on the entire way
Yes.
to the daycare.
Yes, ma'am.
They were keeping me company in the car because
Yes,
I
ma'am.
was beside myself.
Yes, ma'am.
No time to call Rusty in there.
Yes, ma'am. When you left the daycare,
My parents picked me up and took me home. I was heard that we were instructed, my brother was also there, that we were instructed to go home. So,
By whom?
I have no idea. A police officer, I presume. You'd have to ask my mother or my brother.
Okay. Did they tell you where Rusty was?
Nope. They said they didn't know where he was being taken.
So did you go to the house?
Yep. Went to the house. I was in a fairly catatonic state. My dad and my brother started making phone calls to all the local hospitals.
Okay.
And they eventually got a hold of, I don't know, whatever the hospital is, Atlanta Medical Center.
Yes, ma'am.
And they wouldn't tell my dad anything but that he was being taken there. So we got in the car and we left.
To go to Atlanta Medical
That's
Center?
correct.
Okay. Was Ian still at the daycare when you
Yes,
left?
he was, and that was instructed that was the best idea, was to keep him at the daycare.
Who instructed you that?
The Donna, the woman that runs the daycare.
And you left him there?
Yep, that's the safest place for him to be. I had no idea what was going on. I'm sorry, so then we went home, and after we went home and we left the Atlanta Medical Center, Detective Thompson...
Let's go back to the medical center. You indicated a minute ago, or a few minutes ago, that that's where you found...
Yeah, I want to go back even further than that, I guess.
Well, answer my question, and then we'll go back. When you were...
Let's ask question. Next question, Counsel.
Yes, sir. When you went to the Atlanta Medical Center, ma'am, did you find out what had happened to Rusty?
They took me into what I call the death room.
Okay, so they
I
told you...
sat in a chair, and someone, I have no idea who they are, came over and said that he came in with multiple gunshot wounds and that he was dead. I don't remember anything they said after that.
Okay, so you
I
found...
fell to the floor.
You found out at the hospital that Rusty had been shot?
That's correct.
Okay, and you say the death room. At that point, did they tell you or indicate to you Rusty was in fact dead?
Yep.
Okay, is that the first time you found out he was dead?
Yep.